The invitation nobody expected. The room hummed with the kind of quiet you only find in sacred spaces, where secrets wait to be spoken and silence dares you to break it. It was a private gathering, not for press, not for applause, just a circle of artists, musicians, actors, filmmakers, invited by Oprah herself for a conversation no one could fully define. The invitation had been simple. We're not here to perform. We're here to be human. Lisa sat near the back, not hiding, but not eager either. Her dark eyes followed the rhythm of the room. Some familiar faces, some legends, all of them older, all of them seemingly more qualified to speak about life, grief, and grace. She wasn't sure why she had come. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was guilt, or maybe, just maybe, it was the quiet whisper from deep inside that had been saying for years, "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Across the room, Oprah stood, radiant in calm and confidence. Her voice was low, intimate, as if every word had been pre-approved by the soul. "Tonight isn't about fixing each other," she began. "It's about naming the places we've been afraid to name, the ones that still ache when no one is watching." There were nods, subtle, careful. One actor talked about losing his brother to addiction. A choreographer spoke of battling breast cancer in secret while staging world tours. Lisa stayed quiet, but Oprah noticed her. She always did. She turned gently toward Lisa, voice soft but unshakably direct. "Lisa, you've spent most of your life performing, but tonight, if you're willing, I'd love to hear who you are underneath the spotlight." A few heads turned, not out of judgment, but curiosity. No cameras, no stylists, just Lisa, a girl from Birham who once danced barefoot in the rain, now sitting in a Manhattan studio with the floor trembling beneath the weight of that one question. Lisa looked up slowly. Her lips parted, then closed again. What could I possibly say that mattered? What words could fit all the silence I've carried? She glanced down at her hands, fingers slightly trembling, thumb brushing the edge of the ring her mother had given her when she left home. And then she spoke. "I wasn't sure I had anything wise to say tonight," she began, her voice lower than usual, a little raw. "But maybe it's time I told the truth." The room didn't move, not even a breath, because when the quietest person in the room begins to speak, you listen. And no one, not even Lisa, could have predicted how much that truth would change the lives of everyone present. The silence before the storm. For a moment, Lisa seemed to regret speaking. Her eyes flickered down, like she was weighing every word in her chest before letting it leave her lips. The room waited, not impatiently, but reverently. Lisa looked at Oprah, then past her, into some invisible memory on the wall behind. "There were nights," she said slowly, "when I'd finish a concert in front of thousands and go back to a hotel room where no one knew my name in my own language." Her voice didn't break, but it bent. "People think success fills you, but sometimes it just gives your emptiness an echo." There was a pause, sharp, still. Oprah didn't interrupt. She never did. Lisa took a breath, fingers tightening over each other on her lap. "I was 14 when I left Thailand. I thought I was chasing a dream, but no one told me that dreams come with locked doors, unfamiliar languages, and a kind of homesickness that doesn't just miss a place, it misses being known." A soft exhale moved through the room. One of the older singers across from her gently wiped under her eyes. Lisa continued, her voice growing steadier with each word, as if she had waited years to release that. "I remember calling my mom after practice one night. I was exhausted. I had messed up the choreography again. My Korean was still broken. Someone in the practice room had laughed. She swallowed. I told my mom maybe I should come home. She didn't say anything right away. Then she whispered, "Even the lotus grows in mud, my child." The phrase hung in the air like incense. A few heads tilted, absorbing it. It didn't fix anything, Lisa added, but it made me feel less alone. Like maybe suffering wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was just part of the path. Someone at the back murmured, "That's Buddhism, right?" Lisa nodded faintly. I didn't understand it back then. I still don't fully. But I remember something else my mom said once. She said, "Pain shared is pain lightened." If you can't be joyful, at least be honest. A quiet murmur of agreement passed through the room. Oprah leaned forward, voice low and full of warmth. "And tonight, you're being both." Lisa gave a small smile, weary but genuine. "I didn't come here to inspire anyone," she said softly. "I just wanted to stop pretending that I was okay. And maybe by telling the truth, someone else might feel less crazy for still hurting." And with that, Lisa lowered her eyes again, the room draped in silence. Not empty silence, but full, holy silence. The kind that always comes right before something sacred is born. 14 and frightened. The room hadn't shifted. No one reached for their phone. No one asked the next question. They just waited, still, open, like something inside them knew Lisa wasn't finished yet. And she wasn't. She looked up again. This time, her voice was steadier, though the memory behind it still trembled. "I remember my first night in Korea like a bruise. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just cold." She paused, glancing toward the floor as though it still remembered the feeling beneath her bare feet. "I didn't know how to ask where the bathroom was. I didn't know how to say I was hungry. I just smiled a lot, hoping someone would see past it." Her voice lowered. No one did. A gentle breath passed through her lips. "I would sit by the window after practice and count how many lights were still on in the other buildings. It felt like a game. Like, if someone else was awake, maybe I wasn't completely forgotten." A music producer near the corner shifted, placing a hand over his mouth. Lisa caught the movement, but didn't slow down. There was a moment, a tiny one. I had just failed my vocal evaluation. I walked into the dorm, locked the bathroom door, sat on the floor, and whispered, "I want to go home." Her eyes were misted now, but she didn't blink them away. But I didn't cry. Not then. I thought if I cried, it would mean I had already lost. Her voice cracked, not in volume, but in depth. No one had ever told me that sometimes crying is how you survive. Across the room, Oprah's expression had softened, her hand now pressed over her heart. Lisa took a breath, as if choosing each word from the silence itself. People see Blackpink now and think we're made of glitter and gold. But for years, I was just a scared Thai girl who danced through blisters and memorized songs in a language that didn't feel like mine. She gave a small, almost self-conscious smile. Sometimes I wonder if they would still cheer if they saw the nights I broke down over a bowl of instant noodles. One of the older artists near the window whispered, almost to herself, "I would." Lisa heard it, and for the first time that night, her shoulders dropped, just slightly, as if someone had finally said the words she had needed all those years ago. Buddhism and the broken child. Lisa leaned back slightly in her chair, as if something inside her was unlocking, not loudly, but with the quiet click of an old memory resurfacing. Her fingers found the ring on her right hand again, thumb tracing its edge. "My mother used to make me sit still at sunset," she said. "No phone, no toys, just stillness." A few people in the room smiled faintly, recognizing the practice. She'd light incense, fold her legs under her skirt, and say, "Close your eyes, watch your breath. Stay with your breath like it's your little sister, always wandering, but worth waiting for." There was a soft laugh from the group, not amused, but tender. Lisa smiled too, but her voice grew lower, more intimate. "I never liked it. I used to squirm. I wanted to dance, not sit. I didn't understand why we had to just be still." She paused. "But now, I would give anything to go back to that porch in Buriram, with my knees hurting and the cicadas screaming, and just listen to her hum." Her voice cracked, not from pain, but from presence. Back then, she told me something I didn't really understand. She said, "Pain isn't a punishment. It's a teacher. And if you bow to it, it might show you where you're still holding too tight." Oprah murmured softly, "That's beautiful." Lisa nodded, her eyes far away and full of remembering. "When I moved to Korea, I forgot all of that. I forgot stillness. I forgot breath. I forgot how to listen. All I knew was I had to prove something." She looked around the room, meeting no one's gaze, and yet speaking to everyone. "I tried to outrun my pain by practicing more, smiling harder, dancing until my feet bled. But the thing about pain is, it doesn't chase you. It waits." Someone near the front gently whispered, "That's true." Lisa's eyes returned to Oprah. It wasn't until much later, years later, that I sat still again, in a hotel room in Paris, actually. And I remembered what she said about bowing. She swallowed. So I did. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, palms open, tears running down my cheeks. And I said, "I see you. I hear you. You can stay." There wasn't a single dry eye in the room now. That was the first time I stopped trying to heal and started trying to be human. Idle, but not enough. There was a moment of hesitation before Lisa spoke again. Not out of fear. No, not anymore. Out of respect. As if the next story required silence first, like a temple does before it invites you in. She folded her hands in her lap. The bracelet on her wrist shimmered faintly under the studio lights, catching the gold glint of the word Lalisa, engraved in delicate Thai script. "Debuting was supposed to be the dream," she said quietly. And in some ways, it was. A soft wave of agreement passed through the room. Many had lived that same illusion. But the day Blackpink debuted, I remember calling my mom from the dressing room, right after the stage. Everyone was celebrating. There were flowers, reporters, screaming fans. She paused. But I felt nothing. Someone near the back shifted uncomfortably. Lisa noticed and nodded gently. Not because I wasn't grateful. I was. But because I realized something that night. She looked up, locking eyes with no one in particular, and yet everyone at once. They loved what I did, but they didn't know who I was. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, and some of them didn't want to. She leaned slightly forward, elbows resting gently on her knees. I remember reading a comment the next morning. It said, "She's just a dancer, she can't really sing." Her lips tightened, holding back the memory, like you hold back tears in public. Delicately, but with effort. I had trained for years. I had sung till my throat hurt. But suddenly, my voice wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. Someone across the room whispered, "God." Lisa heard it, but didn't acknowledge. Her eyes were focused elsewhere, somewhere behind the memory. That's when I learned that being famous doesn't protect you from feeling invisible. Sometimes it makes it worse. She sat back, but her words kept walking forward. Because now, people weren't just doubting me. They were packaging me, slicing me up into digestible bits. Lisa, the dancer. Lisa, the pretty foreigner. Lisa, the stage machine. Her hands moved unconsciously, as if brushing labels off her skin. But who was Lisa really? Off stage, off camera, off brand. The question lingered. Not rhetorical, not even answerable, just real. She drew in a breath, then released it slowly, as if letting go of years in a single exhale. There were nights I danced harder just to silence the question. Nights I smiled wider just to hide how small I felt. But eventually, you start wondering if anyone will ever love you without the costume. A hush settled over the room, not heavy, but weighty. The kind of silence that makes people sit straighter, listen deeper, breathe slower. And the worst part, she said, her voice almost breaking, I started thinking maybe they were right. Oprah leaned in, her voice velvet soft. What changed that thought, Lisa? Lisa didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her hands again, then slowly up, with a half smile that looked like it had fought its way through a storm. I stopped asking if I was enough, she said, and I started asking, enough for who? The pressure to heal. The studio lights seemed dimmer now, or maybe it was the shift in atmosphere, the kind that happens when someone stops entertaining and starts confessing. Lisa leaned back just a little, her eyes soft but focused, like someone about to open a wound they'd carefully stitched shut for years. In our industry, she began, you're not allowed to stay broken. A murmur of recognition passed through the circle. Heads nodded, not because they agreed, but because they'd lived it. You can break, Lisa continued. You can cry in a documentary, post a quote about healing, maybe even take a short break. Her lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. But then you come back stronger, right? That's the rule. She looked around. Stronger, wiser, grateful for the pain, as the captions say. Her voice darkened, not in anger, but in fatigue. No one wants to hear that you're still hurting. No one knows what to do with an open wound that doesn't close on schedule. Someone let out a breath too loud to hide. Lisa glanced at them gently, offering silent understanding. I remember being told by a brand rep once, don't post anything too sad. It doesn't match the concept. She gave a dry laugh. I wasn't trying to be sad. I was just being real. Oprah's voice cut through the stillness like silk. Did you feel like you had to pretend? Lisa didn't even hesitate. Every day. She paused, letting that land before continuing. I remember smiling through interviews hours after panic attacks, doing encore performances with my knees bandaged so tight I couldn't feel them, and still thinking, maybe if I shine hard enough, no one will notice I'm disappearing. The last word hit the room like a dropped glass. Disappearing. Because that's what it felt like, she added quietly. Every time I chose the image over the truth, a little more of me faded. Her voice softened, but her words stayed razor sharp. Healing became a performance, a narrative, like I had to be an inspiration before I was even a person. She drew in a slow breath, then let it go. And the more people called me strong, the more I was afraid to admit I wasn't. A silence bloomed, wide and full of ache. The truth? Lisa said, looking Oprah in the eye now. I didn't need to be told I was strong. I needed to be told I could fall apart and still be loved. And in that moment, no one clapped. No one said wow. They just sat with her. In the ache, in the honesty. And for the first time that evening, Lisa wasn't the only one crying. The moment of breakage. The room didn't move. Not because it was frozen, but because Lisa had just touched the part of truth no one wants to admit they recognize. She looked down for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not quieter, just heavier. "There was a night in Tokyo," she said, "after one of our biggest concerts." She paused. "The fans were unbelievable. The stage was electric. I smiled. I danced. I waved until my cheeks hurt." Her lips pressed together. "Then I went back to the hotel, alone." She exhaled. "The lights were still on when I walked in. Room service tray still on the table. The makeup was still on my face." Her fingers brushed her cheeks slowly, as if wiping away something still clinging there. "I sat on the carpet, not even the bed, just the floor. I pulled my knees in, rested my chin, and said out loud." She looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't think I can do this anymore." The words landed like a soft explosion, quiet but irreversible. No one heard me. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, frozen, empty. Her voice barely escaped her throat. It wasn't the loud pain, not the panic or the sobbing. It was worse. She stared past the wall, into something only she could see. It was the silence, the kind that makes you wonder if you've disappeared without anyone noticing. Oprah's eyes were glistening now. She said nothing, just listened. Lisa folded her arms across her chest, like someone trying to hold herself together. I remember whispering, "Mom," just that. Not even a sentence, like a question, like a prayer. She paused again, then added softly. But there was no answer, just the hum of the air conditioner and my own breath shaking in the dark. Someone sniffled quietly. Another wiped their cheek, but Lisa didn't. She stayed in it, fully. That night wasn't about giving up, she said. It was about breaking. And sometimes those two feel exactly the same. She looked up now, her gaze no longer distant, but direct. "I used to be afraid of people seeing that version of me, the girl on the floor, the girl with no strength left." A faint smile flickered. "But maybe that's the most honest version I've ever been." The room breathed again, not with relief, but with reverence, because everyone knew that was the night Lisa stopped performing for the world and started whispering to her own soul. The first realization, Lisa didn't rush her next words. She let the silence stretch, let it soften the edges of her memory before stepping into it again. Her voice came back lower, more rooted. "The next morning, I didn't say anything to anyone." She glanced around the room. "I went to rehearsal, put on my game face, did what idols are trained to do, keep going." Oh, but something had shifted. She didn't know it yet, not fully, but it was there. Like a crack in glass that no one else sees, but you feel every time you breathe. That night, back in my room, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll. I just sat, cross-legged, on the floor. She smiled faintly, almost like I was a little girl again, on the porch, with incense smoke curling above my mother's head. Her voice softened into something ancient and familiar. She used to tell me, "Suffering doesn't need to leave for you to feel peace. Sometimes peace just needs permission to sit beside it." Someone in the circle whispered, "That's wow." Lisa heard it, but her gaze remained inward, following a thread from the past, gently pulling it back into the present. So I tried it. That night, no music, no distraction, just me and the ache. She paused. I didn't try to push it away, didn't try to make sense of it. I just breathed. A long exhale left her as she spoke the next line. And something in me whispered, "Thank you." She looked up, eyes tender but clear. Not because the pain was good, not because it made sense, but because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. A quiet stillness spread through the room, not heavy, not tense, just present. Like a collective breath had found its rhythm. Oprah tilted her head slightly. "What do you think you were thanking, Lisa?" Lisa considered the question for a long moment. Then, softly, maybe the part of me that had survived, the part that had been waiting patiently for me to stop running. She gave a half smile. And maybe I was thanking the pain too, for staying with me, even when I kept trying to leave it behind. The air in the room grew lighter, but not empty. It was the kind of light that comes not from brightening a space, but from no longer needing to hide inside it. Loving the unfixed self, Lisa sat up straighter now, not with confidence, but with clarity. The kind of posture you carry when you've stopped apologizing for the parts of you that still ache. For the longest time, she said, I believed that healing meant being unbroken. She gave a soft, almost amused shake of the head, like once I cried enough, prayed enough, succeeded enough, the cracks would disappear. She paused. But they didn't. Her eyes searched the room, not for validation, but for courage to keep telling the truth. There were weeks I felt like I was doing better, laughing more, breathing easier. But then something small, someone's comment, an old photo, a canceled plan, and suddenly I was back on the floor again. She folded her hands loosely, like they were tired of clenching. And every time that happened, I blamed myself. Oprah leaned in, her voice almost inaudible. Why? Lisa met her gaze. Because I thought healing was a staircase, linear, predictable. I thought I was failing at it. There were nods now, visible, vulnerable. She continued, until one night I looked at myself in the mirror, tears on my face again, and I just stopped. She paused. I didn't scold myself, didn't say, "Get up, Lisa." I just whispered. She closed her eyes and let the words rise from memory. Even like this, you're worthy. Silence. Holy, sacred silence. That night changed me, she said. Not because I felt better, but because I stopped demanding that I had to. She looked down at her hands, no longer trembling. I stopped chasing the healed version of myself, like she was the only one deserving of love. A deep breath, and I started asking, what if the version still crying in the dark is the one that needs love the most? There were no interruptions, only stillness. Lisa leaned forward slightly, her voice now filled with the softness of surrender. I used to want to be the strong one, the inspiring one, the girl who overcame. She looked up, eyes glassy but unflinching. Now, I just want to be the girl who stayed with the pain, stayed with the breath, stayed with herself. And somehow, that was enough. Compassion as shared suffering. Lisa's voice had softened, but her presence had never felt more solid. She sat not as a global icon, not as an idol, but as a mirror, reflecting something back to every soul in the room. There's a word in Buddhism, she began. Karuna. Someone near the back nodded, whispering, compassion. Lisa smiled gently. Yes, but not quite how we usually think of it. She leaned forward, hands loosely clasped. It's not about pity or kindness from above. It's when someone feels your pain as if it were their own. Her eyes scanned the room. Not to fix it, not to solve it, just to share it. She let the words settle, like dust finding the floor. I used to think I had to get better before I could offer anyone anything, that my brokenness made me a burden. She shook her head slowly. But then I remembered something from when I was 10. There was a street dog outside our house. She had a wound on her side. All the kids were scared of her. A few leaned in. Lisa's voice turned warmer, like a bedtime story laced with wisdom. But I sat with her. I didn't touch her. I just sat on the curb while she limped in circles near me. Every day, same time, after school. She paused. She never barked, never came close, but she always looked at me, like You don't want anything from me. You just see me." Her voice dimmed. That's what I craved most in those hotel rooms, in those dressing rooms, on those flights home after awards. She blinked away the heat behind her eyes. Not a cure, not a cheer, just someone who would sit beside me and say, "I don't need you to be okay. I just need you to know I see you." Oprah whispered, "Lisa, you're describing the highest form of compassion." Lisa gave a humble nod. And once I stopped trying to be the strong one, I started seeing others too. Not their highlight reels, their humanity. She looked around the room, and it wasn't just an observation, it was communion. I started noticing the makeup artists with swollen eyes, the managers who stayed quiet too long, the fans who wrote, "Your music saved me," in trembling English. Her voice softened into something nearly sacred, and I realized we're all carrying something. Sometimes loud, sometimes invisible, but always real. A hush wrapped the room. "So maybe healing isn't climbing out of pain," Lisa said. "Maybe it's building a bench inside it and sitting with someone else there." She looked down at her hands once more, then up, clear-eyed, present. That's when my career stopped being a stage, a beat, and started becoming a place to kneel. The Bangkok encounter. Lisa leaned back in her chair, eyes trailing a memory that had clearly stayed close. "It was just a few months ago," she began softly. "I was back in Bangkok, visiting my mom." She paused, smiling gently as if the thought of home still carried jasmine and warm rice in its scent. We were driving through the neighborhood where I grew up. It was late afternoon, the kind of light that makes everything feel softer, even the streets that used to feel hard. She drew a breath, slow and remembering. At one corner, I saw a little girl sitting alone on the steps of a closed shop. Her school uniform was wrinkled, her knees scraped. She was crying, not loudly, not even moving. Lisa blinked slowly, her voice dipping into something quieter. There was something in her stillness that I recognized. She let that sentence hang. No need to explain it to those who had ever sat in their own pain, waiting for the world to pass. So I asked the driver to stop. A few heads turned, surprised. Lisa continued. I walked over, didn't say anything, just sat down beside her. Her lips lifted, just a little. She didn't look at me. I didn't expect her to. I just let my shoulder rest near hers, close enough to say, "You're not invisible." The studio was silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause. After a minute or two, he reached out and took my pinky finger. Lisa paused. Not my hand, just my pinky. Her voice cracked slightly. And that was it. No words, no advice, no moment of cinematic rescue. She looked up now, eyes misted with something deeper than sadness. I don't think she even knew who I was. I think she just knew I stayed. Oprah's voice was barely above a breath. That sounds like presence. Lisa nodded slowly. It was the first time I realized, maybe I don't have to fix anything. Maybe just not leaving is enough. A musician near the back wiped their face silently. Another person whispered, "That's the kind of love I've always wanted." Lisa heard it. She didn't respond, but her silence carried agreement. "I used to think strength was changing the world," she said. "But maybe strength is just sitting beside someone long enough that they believe they can survive it." She folded her hands gently. "And maybe that's all I ever wanted, too. The shift in fame." Lisa rested her elbows on her knees now, leaning forward, not to perform, but to arrive more fully in the space. "For a long time," she said, "I thought fame was armor." She looked around, voice steady, eyes unwavering. People say fame isolates you, but that's not always true. Sometimes you isolate yourself because you think that's the price of being admired. A few nodded slowly, recognizing the emotional math all too well. You tell yourself, don't be too emotional, don't be too real, don't be too complicated. Keep the brand clean, keep the smile ready. She gave a quiet, self-aware smile. So I polished myself, like glass. She paused. But the thing about glass, it cracks under pressure. A faint murmur of agreement. Lisa continued. The turning point for me wasn't dramatic. No mental breakdown, no scandal, just exhaustion. She exhaled as if remembering the weight of it. ... I woke up one day in a 5-star hotel with awards on the table and fans waiting downstairs, and I felt absolutely nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly in her lap. That's when I realized my success was real, but I wasn't in it. Oprah leaned in. What changed after that? Lisa's eyes softened. I stopped trying to shine. A pause, letting that land. And I started trying to connect. She looked across the circle. I began answering fan letters with longer messages. I started showing up to rehearsals without makeup, just to remind the team that perfection wasn't my brand. Presence was. She chuckled gently. One time a fan came up to me and said, I don't love you because you're flawless. I love you because I can see your sadness and it looks like mine. Her eyes glistened. That one sentence made the years worth it. She drew in a breath, her next words slower, quieter. I stopped asking what I could prove with my fame and started asking what I could witness. Another hush, this one filled with something reverent. And when I stopped performing healing, she said, real healing started to happen. Not in stadiums, but in car rides, in dressing rooms, in the seconds before going on stage when I would whisper to myself. She placed her hand gently over her heart. Just be here, even if it hurts. And somehow, that was enough. Oprah's tears. For the first time all evening, Oprah didn't respond immediately. She just sat there, eyes glassed, lips parted slightly, hand resting gently over her chest, as if trying to steady a heart that had just remembered how to feel. Lisa waited, respectfully silent, not out of fear this time, but because she understood what silence meant now. Finally, Oprah blinked, once, then twice, and whispered, Lisa, I've sat across from people for decades. World leaders, survivors, saints and sinners. Her voice trembled. No dramatics, no performance, just truth. But what you just gave us, this space, this honesty, it's not an interview. She looked around the room, then back at Lisa. It's a sacred conversation. Lisa's gaze softened, unsure what to say. But she didn't need to. Oprah wasn't finished. You're not talking about faith, she said, voice cracking. You're living it. Lisa's lips parted, stunned into stillness. I don't know what God means to you, Oprah continued, but what you've described tonight, that's holy ground. A quiet sob escaped someone in the circle. Another hand reached for a tissue. Oprah turned to Lisa again, her voice now barely above a whisper. You know what breaks my heart? That the world tried to label you perfect and almost buried the real you underneath it. Lisa inhaled sharply, because that line felt like it knew her address. Oprah leaned forward, voice firmer now, raw with admiration. But you didn't let it. You kept listening to that small voice, the one that said, even now, even like this, I deserve to be seen. Lisa's lips trembled, but her eyes held steady. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing her. Oprah smiled, tears streaking openly now. You didn't come here tonight to heal others, she said, but you did, and not with advice, not with a plan, just with presence. She touched her chest again, tapping gently. And presence, my dear, is the loudest form of love there is. The room was silent, not because there was nothing left to say, begin, but because everything worth saying had just been felt. The paradox of healing. Lisa sat quietly for a moment after Oprah's words. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from running out of things to say, but from arriving at the very center of something you've been circling your whole life. Then she spoke, softly, slowly. "You know what's strange?" she said, looking not at Oprah, but slightly above her shoulder, as if talking to the part of herself that still needed convincing. "After everything I've lived through, the hardest part wasn't surviving the pain." A pause. It was surviving the expectation to move on from it. There was a collective stillness, the kind that happens when a room full of people realizes they've all been carrying the same unspoken burden. Lisa's voice remained calm, but each word landed like a feather dipped in truth. People mean well. They say things like, "You're so strong," or "You're an inspiration." She gave a faint tear, but because everything worth saying had just been felt. The paradox of healing. Lisa sat quietly for a moment after Oprah's words. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from running out of things to say, but from arriving at the very center of something you've been circling your whole life. Then she spoke, softly, slowly. "You know what's strange?" she said, looking not at Oprah, but slightly above her shoulder, as if talking to the part of herself that still needed convincing. "After everything I've lived through, the hardest part wasn't surviving the pain." A pause. It was surviving the expectation to move on from it. There was a collective stillness, the kind that happens when a room full of people realizes they've all been carrying the same unspoken burden. Lisa's voice remained calm, but each word landed like a feather dipped in truth. People mean well. They say things like, "You're so strong," or "You're an inspiration." She gave a faint tear. Maybe it's to feel deeply and stay soft anyway. A hush washed over the circle like light through fog. Oprah placed her hand gently over her chest. "That," she said quietly, "is the kind of healing this world needs more of." Lisa nodded once, small but certain. "I don't think pain ever fully leaves," she said, "but I do think when someone sits beside you in it, it becomes lighter. Not because it changed, but because you don't have to carry it alone." And in that moment, the entire room understood. Healing wasn't the opposite of hurting. It was hurting in company and letting that be enough. The whisper we all needed. Lisa sat in silence for a long breath, not because she had nothing left to say, but because she knew the next words weren't hers alone. They belonged to everyone in the room, everyone watching from a distance, everyone still trying to breathe through something invisible. Her fingers brushed against the microphone clipped to her collar, and then, with a voice like warm dusk, she said, "I used to pray to stop feeling." The room went still, because I thought pain meant failure. That if I was truly wise or faithful or grateful, I wouldn't hurt anymore. She looked up, full of soft defiance. "But I don't pray for that now." A pause. Then she added, almost like a confession, "Now I pray to feel without breaking." Someone inhaled sharply. Another person reached across the circle and took the hand of the person beside them. Lisa smiled, just barely. Because the more I tried to outrun the ache, the more it owned me. She tilted her head, eyes bright despite the glimmer of tears. But the moment I sat down beside it, like an old friend who never left, something shifted. She pressed her palm flat against her chest, steady and slow. I didn't stop hurting, but I stopped hating myself for hurting. Her voice lowered, and that changed everything. Oprah wiped a tear from her cheek, not with drama, but with quiet reverence. Lisa looked around now, not as a speaker addressing a room, but as a woman meeting the eyes of other souls. "If there's one thing I'd want anyone to leave with tonight," she said, "it's this." A hush fell like snowfall, and Lisa whispered, "You don't have to be healed to be loved." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of breath, of breaking, of belonging. No applause came, just nods, just tears, just people finally letting go of the myth that they had to get over it to be worthy of peace. And as Lisa leaned back into her seat, lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because it was shared, the room did something rare. They didn't stand for her. They sat with her. Together. The room didn't empty right away. No one stood. No one rushed to hug Lisa. They just remained, still, like something sacred had passed through them, and leaving too soon would feel like betrayal. Lisa leaned into the back of her chair, her eyes closed, not in exhaustion, but in peace. A kind of peace that doesn't come from getting answers, but from no longer needing them. And Oprah, still wiping her cheeks, looked out over the circle and said gently, "What happened here tonight wasn't healing. It was permission. Permission to feel, to speak, to ache out loud, and to know we don't have to earn love through perfection." Lisa didn't give the world a sermon. She gave it something far more dangerous. She gave it honesty. And in that honesty, every broken listener heard the words they'd been waiting for. You don't have to be okay to be held. You don't have to be strong to be seen. You don't have to be healed to be loved. And somewhere in homes, in hospital beds, on late-night train rides and lonely cafe tables, those whispers began to echo. They rippled far beyond the studio. Because when one person dares to sit beside their pain without shame, they make space for the rest of us to do the same. So if you're listening now, in pieces, in process, in silence, hear this. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not alone. You're just becoming. And that is holy.